I think personally that they are remedial standards, that there is a lot more to do. But you have here the list of the MDGs. And they basically have to do with very basic issues, such as seeking to reduce poverty by half, to increase primary schooling for all people in the developing countries, to reduce child mortality, to fight AIDS, among other things. To me, these are very important goals. Some of them have been met, most of them have not been met yet. This is still a work in progress. One of the realities to me of this issue is that in many contexts there is still more than a work in progress, are a reality that has to be dealt with at a larger level. For example, what we are trying to accomplish to get every child in developing countries to have a primary education, the industrialized world, numbers of years of education is about 15. So, we are so way behind. There is a big gap between the education levels in the developing countries and the education levels in the industrialized societies. And in this day and age of globalization, education is the most powerful tool for development. So, the MDGs only give you a snapshot of what needs to be done and more. But I want to focus on three issues. One is the issue of compliance to the MDGs. In terms of diasporas, of hometown associations, migrant group organizations, migrants as individuals, members of society, I think the most important issue, the most important act that you must do is to require compliance to the MDGs. Because they are not just a piece of paper that you have signed on as a government and agree to comply with and then don't achieve it. And there are ways to achieve compliance on these issues, and I want to discuss some of those ways. The other issue is that it's important for the hometown associations, the migrant groups, to seek to make their projects compatible with the Millennium Development Goals. Learning about the MDGs in itself will give you a very important education on what does it mean to work on development, because it puts into context what are the targets on basic development issues. And in my experience, one of the weaknesses of migrant organizations is precisely the inability to reconcile what you want to do and what your beneficiaries really need to achieve development. And that lack of reconciliation often is perhaps the most challenging issue. Many of your organizations, for example, invest significant amounts of money on projects that you think are having an impact on development, but without the guidance of exactly where to put the money in to have the better impact. So you need to have a closer understanding of what are the goals and standards that need to be established in order to have a better impact in development in the communities where you want to work. And third is the issue of partnerships. How do you work internationally to achieve the Millennium Development Goals? On the issue of compliance, one of the main issues is that the MDGs, these 8 points, these 8 goals and these 18 targets, and there are hundreds of indicators on how to measure. In the development work, we have learned more about how to measure poverty than how to reduce it. In itself, that makes a very critical issue and a shaming issue for those of us who work on development, because it can become an issue of intellectual masturbation rather than actually achieving the reality of development. And I think we lack a lot of self-criticism on issues on working on development. But many goals were established, 8 goals that, in my opinion, are still remedial, yet they have been very difficult to be achieved in most cases. And the goals were set around the time where the issue of remittances actually become important. And there was a lot of even opportunism among many entities in the international community to get migrants to focus on the MDGs, when in fact migrants left because of the inability to have a good quality of life in their home countries. But whenever we look at it, and I'm not going to go over the Millennium Development Goals, because I want to focus on the other issues, but whenever we look at the goals themselves, they are yet to be accomplished. I think they are yet to be accomplished not because the governments don't want to accomplish them. I actually think that most governments in the world, in the developing countries, setting corruption aside, are actually struggling to get development to work. There is a commitment by government officials to really achieve development. But the challenges are so daunting that it's just very difficult. Just let me give you examples to illustrate this. The Nigerian government, for example, one of the wealthiest countries in Africa, and it has strong reliance on oil. The Ministry of Trade, the trade offices do not have computers. So, I'm not talking about do not have access to the internet. I'm talking about the fact that the employees, the trade officer, the person in charge, for example, of the U.S. trade linkage with Nigeria doesn't have a computer with himself. And if you go country by country, you will see, for example, the government of Haiti, his budget on health is about $10 million in a country of 8 million people. Or a budget on welfare is $3 million. Those are the realities that these governments work with. So when you put the Millennium Development Goals and you tell them, you guys are not doing enough, you're probably wasting the money or spending the money in nice pickup trucks or Isuzu trucks, etc. We have to also be careful of how much burden is put. Doesn't mean that corruption is a problem, but there is more to corruption when it comes to the issue of achieving development. The challenges are quite large. Another example, and I think this is, to me, a very important one, is that for most developing countries, to increase your quality of life, their economies need to grow at least at 10% for 10 consecutive years. Now, no country has been able to grow that fast at that level so consecutively, with one exception. You know which country is that? China. And the reasons are so unique to that country that it makes it an exception. But it's just very hard to grow even at 7% for 10 consecutive years. Now, in terms of per capita growth, the current cost of living in most countries are somewhere around $200 a month. And the reality is that people are earning in those societies about $60 a month. So there is a big gap between your cost of living and your earnings. How do you close that gap? And those are the realities that most people live by today. And my question in general is from the perspective of the diaspora organizations. The first question is, if your commitment is on development, not just in basic philanthropy, it's important to understand how much compliance do you think exists to the Millennium Development Goals? And second, how well informed as a migrant, as a diaspora, you are about development in your home country and about the MDGs in particular. Because we often have strong opinions about development in their home country, but we have very few facts about the actual process of development. And we need to distinguish between facts and opinions.